The sea gives a fishing town everything, and it can take all of it back in about 20 minutes. One mayor in a tiny Japanese village never forgot that, so he pushed through a floodgate 51 feet tall. People called it a monstrous waste of money.
The town is Fudai, the mayor Kotaku Wamura. He'd watched an earlier tsunami wipe out this coast, so he made one thing his life's work: a floodgate 15.5 meters high between the mountainsides. A dozen years to build, mocked as absurd for a town of 3,000. Then in March of 2011, the sea came. Waves around 20 meters, the gate held. Fudai lost no homes behind that wall. The towns on either side were gone.
Sit with that. He managed the threat while it was still a maybe, decades before it ever arrived. Nobody thanked him for it while the sea was calm, either. That is the whole discipline of this episode, standing in one little town.
But was that actually risk management, or was he just lucky the wave came in his lifetime? I mean, plenty of people build things that never get tested. How do you tell the difference between a smart bet and a lucky one?
It was management, and that difference is the whole episode. Luck is what you have when you never looked. Wamura looked. He named a specific uncertain future event, a tsunami over a certain height, and acted before it was real. That's the definition to own. A risk is an uncertain future event, might happen, might not, and if it does, it hits your objectives. The key word is future. It hasn't happened yet, which is why you can still do something cheap about it.
Okay, but then isn't basically everything a risk?
Not quite, and narrowing it is the skill. A risk is specific and uncertain, a named event with a cause you can point at, not vague dread. The vendor could miss the delivery date. A key engineer could quit mid-project. And here's the half-experienced managers forget. Risk is two-sided. It can be a threat that hurts you, or an opportunity that helps you. PMI expects you to hunt the good ones just as hard as the bad.
So half the risks on a project are good news nobody plans for. A supplier's price drops. A task finishes early and frees your best people for the next thing. Those are positive risks, real opportunities, and most of us never even write them down. We hunt for the threats and let the opportunities walk right past. That's leaving free money on the table.
And everyone you find, good or bad, goes in one place, the risk register. The living list at the heart of this task, one row per risk, with how likely it is, how big the hit, who owns it, and the plan if it shows up. PMI even hands you a risk in the outline, quote, poor IT security. And identifying is never one and done, you do it continually, because new risks are born every week.
And this connects straight to last time, Erica. We said a risk that actually happens becomes an issue you scramble to manage in the moment, so everything we do today is the calm hour before that. While a risk is still just a maybe and you still get to choose your move cheaply.
Right, the issue log. So the whole game is catching it while it's still a maybe. And you can't just wait for risks to wander up and introduce themselves. So where do you go hunting? My read is you go by category, or you'll miss whole families of them. Technical, the tech might not perform. External, a supplier, the market, a new law, even the weather. Organizational, funding, or priorities shift under you. And the project itself, a shaky estimate or an over-optimistic plan, you sweep each one on purpose.
Exactly right, Liam, that's the hunt. And here's the entire point. A risk lives in the register while it's uncertain. The moment it comes true, it becomes an issue you're managing and it moves to the issue log. Everything today is on the near side of that line, the maybe side, where it's still cheap and you have choices. And the work runs in a clean loop. Identify, analyze, respond, monitor, over and over to the end.
And this is worth real points now, not a footnote. Business environment used to be 8% of the exam. On the 2026 version, it's 26%. It more than tripled, and risk is one of its biggest tasks. So if you skimmed this domain, you're leaving a quarter of your score on the table.
One quick, genuinely useful thing before we go deeper. Over at certs.professorerica.com, there are free practice questions and free flashcards, no sign-up, and the business environment set is exactly the judgment-style question people fumble on exam day. Run the risk set right after this, while the register versus issue line is fresh.
So try this before we move on. You spot a real risk early, weeks before it could ever hit, and you feel pretty good about yourself. But on the exam, is naming it the actual win? Or is spotting it the easy part, and the real points are in what you do next? Hold that thought real quick, because this next part matters to you. If any of this is helping, tap that like button, then hit subscribe and ring the bell so the next one finds you. Both are free and take about a second, but they tell the algorithm to show this to one more person who needs it. So let's pay that question off. And to keep us honest on the hard calls today, we've got a guest at the desk, Professor Espinoza, here to help us pressure test the risk calls. Good to have you.
Glad to be here. Point me at any answer that sounds too clean and I'll lean on it. On risk especially, the tidy answer is usually the one that costs you later.
So you've named a pile of risks. They're never all the same size, and you can't fight all of them at once. So before you do anything about them, what's the first move?
You score them on 2 dimensions, never one. How likely, the probability, and how big the hit if it does, the impact. You hold both at once, because apart they fool you. A near certain but trivial risk can matter less than a rare one that would sink the project. So you plot every risk on a grid, probability against impact. Top corner, high and high, is the fire you fight now. Bottom, low and low, you barely track. The off corners are judgment, a big but unlikely you keep a plan ready for, a small but frequent you just absorb. The mistake is one number, treating a loud, cheap risk like a quiet, catastrophic one.
So high probability always wins the fight for your attention?
That's the exact trap, and no. Probability alone never wins. A 90% chance of losing $100 should not outrank a 5% chance of losing the whole project. You always weigh probability against impact together. That first pass, rating things high, medium, or low to sort the pile, is qualitative analysis. It's fast, it's a little subjective, and its only job is to tell you which handful of risks are worth deeper work.
So the first pass is quick and rough, just to shrink the pile. Then you take the few that survive that cut and put real numbers on them.
Exactly, and that's the second, harder pass. Qualitative sorts the list. Quantitative measures the ones that matter. You don't run heavy math on all 50 risks, that's a waste of a week. You run it on the vital few the first pass flagged, the handful that could actually move the budget or the date. And the workhorse there turns a gut feeling into a defensible figure. It has a name the exam loves: expected monetary value.
Read me the actual formula, not the vibe, the actual line, because this is the one people quote wrong.
Expected monetary value equals probability times impact. That's it. The chance a risk happens times the dollar hit if it does gives one number in money, so you can compare wildly different risks on the same scale. PMI's own example sits in the outline, poor IT security, so picture a data breach. Low probability maybe, but the impact is enormous, and a dollar figure is how you decide how hard to defend it. And EMV isn't the only tool, Liam. When one choice branches into others, you lay it out as a decision tree and run the same math down each branch.
And that poor IT security line is not hypothetical money. The current industry benchmark puts the average data breach at around $4.5 million, and in the United States it's more than double that, over 10 million. That is one risk, one row in the register, and it can carry a bigger number than the entire rest of the project, which is exactly why you put a figure on it, in dollars, before it ever happens, instead of just hoping it doesn't.
Let me make impact land before I show you a real one, because a number on a slide never hits like a number you guessed at first. Same trick as last week. The Fukushima cleanup and compensation, all in. Over or under $100 billion? Commit to a guess.
Under, definitely under, 100 billion for one plant? This is true, is impossibly high to me.
Nearly double it. The government's own estimate put the cleanup and compensation at about $188 billion. One event, one risk that was already on the table, and the number is almost incomprehensible.
And here's what makes Fukushima the sharp lesson. That risk was not unknown. The seawall was about 10 meters. An internal report warned a tsunami could come in over 10 and was waved off as unrealistic. So the risk was identified, then analyzed to a number everyone was comfortable with. Not a failure to see it. A failure to score it honestly. The most expensive mistake in analysis isn't missing a risk, it's rating a real one too low because the true number is inconvenient.
And none of this is our paraphrase. Look at the outline itself, because the exact words are the lesson.
Identify risks. Analyze risks. Maintain a risk register, and the example is poor IT security. Name it, score it, keep it on a living list. Straight from the source. And how hard you push is set by your risk appetite, how much uncertainty the organization will actually accept, written as a threshold in your risk management plan. A startup chasing a market accepts risk a hospital never would. The appetite tells you where the line sits.
So carry two things off this desk. Score every risk on probability and impact together, never one alone. And spend the real quantitative effort only on the vital few that earn it. In dollars you can defend. Now, once you know which risks matter, what do you actually do about them? So we can name a risk and score it. Now the move the whole title is about. What do you actually do about each one? PMI gives you a menu, and picking the right item is the exam skill.
5 strategies for a threat worth knowing cold. Avoid, transfer, mitigate, accept, escalate. Avoid, you eliminate the cause so it can't happen. Transfer, you hand the impact to someone better equipped, insurance or a fixed price contract. Mitigate, you shrink the probability or the impact. Accept, you live with it, often with a reserve set aside. And escalate, it's above your authority, so you raise it.
Think of a road trip in a storm, because these 5 map right onto it.
Go ahead, run it.
The storm is the risk. Avoid is you don't drive tonight. No trip, no crash. Transfer is you buy the insurance, someone else pays if it goes wrong. Mitigate is snow tires and slowing down. Same trip, much smaller odds of disaster. Accept is you just drive and hope, maybe with a spare tire in the trunk, and that spare is your reserve. Escalate is you call your boss because the bridge you need is closed, and that's genuinely not your call to make.
Okay, but push on the insurance one. If transfer is buying insurance, why isn't it always the safe answer? You just make it someone else's problem.
Because unlike a spare tire you pay for once, the premium comes out of every month you never crash. And the insurer covers the car, not your ruined trip. You're still late. Transfer moves the money, it doesn't move the delay.
That's the rule under the analogy. Transfer shifts the impact, but you pay a premium whether it hits or not, and it leaves a residual risk you still carry. Residual is what's left after your response. Secondary risk is its cousin, a new one your response created. The cheaper vendor cuts cost but raises the quality risk. Check every response for both.
And there's a matching menu for the good risks, the opportunities. My read is it's the same 5 just flipped. Avoid becomes exploit, you make sure the good thing happens. Transfer becomes share, you partner with someone better placed to grab the upside. Mitigate becomes enhance, you raise the odds or the payoff. And accept and escalate, those two stay the same on both sides. So it really isn't 10 strategies at all, it's 5 shapes, and the only question is which of 2 directions you're pushing, a threat down or an opportunity up.
Exactly right, Liam, so look at them side by side. Avoid mirrors exploit, you make the good thing happen. Transfer mirrors share, you partner to capture it. Mitigate mirrors enhance, you raise the odds or the payoff. And accept and escalate sit on both sides unchanged. 5 shapes, not 10, and the only question is which way you're pushing. Learn it once, use it twice.
And transfer isn't some modern trick. People have done it for centuries. 300 years ago, merchants packed into a London coffee house run by a man named Edward Lloyd. A ship owner whose vessel might sink carried a risk that could ruin him if it went down.
And this is my favorite part. The underwriters in that room each took a slice of his risk for a fee. No one was wiped out by one lost ship, because the risk was spread across everyone. That coffee house became Lloyd's of London. Transfer invented over coffee.
And you could see who was covered too. There were those little metal plaques on the buildings, right? The fire marks. Back then, an insurance company ran its own fire brigade, so the plaque told the firefighters which houses were theirs to save. No plaque, and I guess they'd just let it burn?
Fire marks, exactly. That badge was proof the risk had been transferred, cast in iron, and nailed to the wall. Same idea as Lloyd's, made physical.
Okay, hold on, because Liam had a live objection earlier, and it's the one a lot of experienced people secretly believe. Say it out loud, because if we don't answer it, half the room is going to skip this whole thing on their next project.
Fine. Honestly, isn't most of this paperwork theater? You fill in a register nobody opens again, half the entries never happen, and the risk that actually gets you is always the one nobody wrote down. I've watched a team spend a full week on a risk workshop, color-coded and everything, and then get blindsided by a thing that wasn't even on the list. So genuinely, why not skip the ceremony and just deal with problems as they actually hit? What does the register buy me?
I'll disagree with that hard, Liam, because it feels smart and it's the mindset the exam marks wrong. The register isn't the point, the thinking is. Naming a risk while it's a maybe buys a deliberate response instead of a scramble, and money set aside so the hit doesn't blow your budget. A risk you never named becomes an issue at full price, no plan, no reserve. The one that blindsided your team is the argument for identifying continually, not against it.
And that's not just a nice speech, it's testable, and it's worth points. On the exam, this exact reflex has a name, and knowing it changes which answer you pick when 4 of them all sound reasonable.
It does, on the decision filter, risk lives at step 2, assess before you act. The wrong answer jumps to a fix, or waits and reacts, before anyone analyzed the risk. You assess first. And it leans on step 6, respect the process, you follow your risk management plan instead of improvising.
That reserve you keep mentioning, where does the money for accept actually come from? My abuela runs our family like a benevolent little state, and there's always rice held back for the guest nobody warned her about. She controls that pantry, nobody else does. Is a project reserve just her rice?
Close, and there are 2 pantries. A known risk you accept you fund from the contingency reserve, and you, the PM, control it, inside your baseline. That's your abuela's rice. The other pantry, the management reserve, is for the truly unknown, and the sponsor holds that key. Known risks, your reserve. Unknown unknowns, the sponsors.
Let me put numbers on it, because this is how the reserve actually gets sized. Take 3 known risks. 30% chance of a $200,000 hit, that's 60 grand. 50-50 on an $80,000 one, that's 40. A fifth of a $250,000 hit, that's 50. Add the 3 expected values up, and your contingency reserve is $150,000. That's not a guess, that's math you can defend.
That's exactly it. Probability times impact, summed, risk by risk. Not a gut feel 10%, a number you can defend in a room.
So you've picked a move and funded it from the right pantry. That's the whole difference between a project that survives its bad day and one that's over budget the first time anything slips. But the last question separates a real plan from a binder on a shelf. Do you actually watch it? Let's go find out. So we can name a risk, score it, and pick a move. The last enabler is the one people file and forget. Monitor and control your risks. Espinoza's back to help us drill it and lean on the edges.
Happy to. And this is the one that quietly decides projects, because a risk register you build once and never open again is just decoration.
The mechanism is simple and relentless. Your risk register is a living document, and you work it at every status meeting. You walk the open risks, check whether anything got more likely or more damaging, close the ones that passed, and add the new ones born since last time. And each serious risk gets a trigger, a defined early warning sign that says this one is about to move from maybe to real. The trigger turns monitoring from staring at a list into catching a risk while you can still do something cheap about it. Miss it, and you find out the same way everyone else does, when it's already an issue.
And there's a communicate half PMI names directly. Your last enabler is to communicate the status of a risk's impact on the project. That means no silent surprises. The sponsor should never learn about your top risk at the moment it detonates. A one-line risk status in every report, here's our biggest exposure and here's the trend, is what keeps trust intact when a bad day finally comes. And know the two documents PMI keeps separate here, Maya. The risk register is the detailed list, one row per individual risk, the working document your team lives in. The risk report is the summary, the overall risk picture of the whole project, the trend and the biggest exposures. You don't hand a sponsor a 50-row register, you hand them the report.
And the best version of this you can point at is a wall of steel on a river.
The Thames Barrier. London sits on a floodplain, and a North Sea storm surge is a known catastrophic risk. So they built a response, 10 enormous steel gates across the river. But building it wasn't the job, watching is. The agency tracks the tides and the surge constantly, and when the numbers cross a threshold, they close the gates hours before the surge arrives, then reopen them. Closed for flood defense a few hundred times since the 80s. That's the whole task in one structure. A response you built, a trigger you monitor, and an action you take before the risk ever lands.
So let's drill it, exam style, because this is where the points actually live. First scenario, a risk you'd logged weeks ago. A key vendor might slip, just came true. The vendor has officially missed the date, and your team is now blocked and idle. What's your single best next action?
Recognize it's not a risk anymore. It happened, so it's an issue now. You move it into the issue log, execute the response you'd already planned for exactly this, and act to clear the block. That's a step 2 answer that pays off, because you planned it in advance. Watch the distractors. Keep monitoring it in the register? No, it already fired. Start brainstorming options now. You shouldn't invent a response mid-crisis. You execute the one you wrote when it was still a maybe. That calm Maya, reaching for a plan instead of panicking, is the whole payoff of managing the risk early.
Harder one, and this is a favorite exam shape. A low probability, huge impact threat. A rare event that could sink the whole project, but you genuinely can't prevent it, and mitigating it barely moves the needle. So what's the move?
That's the textbook home for transfer. You can't avoid it, and mitigation barely dents it, so you hand the financial impact to someone built to carry it, an insurer or a contract. That's literally what insurance exists for, the rare, ruinous event. And here's the honest fork, because I'll push the version a lot of people default to. On any serious threat, just transfer it. Buy the policy, sign the fixed price deal, make it somebody else's problem, done.
Hang on though, that can't be right for everything.
And you're right to stop me, because it isn't. Transfer is perfect for the rare catastrophe you can't control. But it's not free and it's not total. You pay the premium whether the risk hits or not. A fixed price vendor just prices the risk back into your bill, and you're almost always left with a residual risk. The insurer pays the claim, but your project is still late, so you match the move to the risk. Avoid what you can delete, mitigate what you can shrink, accept the small stuff with a reserve, and transfer only when someone else genuinely is better equipped. Transferring everything just means paying premiums to feel safe while the leftover risk still sits on your desk.
So both drills are really the same reflex. You decided the move while the risk was still a maybe, so on the day it turns real, you execute a plan instead of panicking. The calm on a bad day is bought weeks earlier, back when nobody felt any urgency at all. That's the hard part, doing the work before it obviously matters.
That's the whole thing, and here's my honest confession on it. I keep a shelf of orchids that I over-research and underwater. I read everything and touch nothing. A risk register is the exact opposite discipline. You check it constantly and you actually act. Watching without acting is how a risk you were tracking still lands on you at full price.
Professor Espinosa, thank you. That pressure was exactly what this one needed. Leave us with the single line worth remembering.
My pleasure. Keep one idea and you'll never miss one of these. Risk management is a thing you do to a maybe before it becomes a fact. You name it, you score it, you pick a move, you fund it, and you watch it all the way down. Do that, and the bad day arrives with a plan already waiting for it.
So that's Business Environment Task 5. Next in this block is continuous improvement, taking what a project taught you, the risks that bit and the ones you caught, and feeding all of it into the next project so you're not learning the same lesson twice. Don't sleep on this domain, it's more than a quarter of your whole exam now.
But hold today's 2 ideas first. A risk is an uncertain future event, and your job is to manage it while it's still a maybe. Name it, score it on probability and impact, pick from the 5 moves, fund the reserve, and monitor it with a trigger. Do that, and a risk that comes true is just a plan you execute, not a disaster that finds you.
If this finally made risk feel like a skill instead of a form, subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep making these. And the free practice questions and flashcards are waiting at certs.professorerica.com. The business environment set is exactly where the fresh, high-value points are hiding on the new exam. Before you close the tab, one honest question. On your last project, did you manage your biggest risk before it hit? Or find out about it the hard way? Tell us in the comments. Manage the maybe, and you'll pick the answer the exam is really testing for. We'll see you in the next one.